So see if you can tell this. Who am I? I made over $17 million this past year, but I've made $228 million over the lifetime of my career. But I still have more passion than most people in all the world to play the game of football. I do not believe in entitlement because I believe that each year is a new season and a new opportunity, and you only get out of that year what you get in life through hard work and sacrifice. I may be 39 years old, but I don't want to be doing anything else right now than competing on the football field. I am committed to doing my job, all of my roles, all of my responsibilities with the utmost excellence. I am either in the office, the film room, or the team facilities earlier than most, and I often stay the longest. If I want to be my best, then I believe that I have to be put to my best. I command the respect of 150 plus teammates and organizational employees. It does not matter to me who has respected me in the past, because I am driven to work hard and please the Lord with those who He's placed in my path this year. And finally, I love Jesus Christ, and I believe that it is my passion for Jesus that motivates me to work hard each and every day and be the very best athlete I possibly can. Don't say anything, but if you think you know who that is, you want to raise your hand. Okay, so we got about half. That's about what I was expecting. My wife did not raise her hand, so maybe I need to go a little further. Who am I? I have the greatest winning percentage in all of the NFL. I am 186 wins and 79 losses over my career. I have led 2 different organizations to the Super Bowl, and I am blessed to be playing in Super Bowl 50 starting next Sunday, February the 7th. I get the privilege to play the position of quarterback, and if this happens to be my last year, I will have had a successful career in the NFL, but my success in life is not only limited to my position as quarterback, because I am a loving father and a loving husband, and I have a mission in life to bring glory and honor to Jesus. So if you didn't know at first, maybe that helps you. Who am I? Peyton Manning, the quarterback for Super Bowl 50 for one of the teams. You know, as I was thinking about those descriptions, the first set of descriptions are what I'd like to call godly character kind of descriptions. But you know what's really tough in our culture is that sometimes, or most of the time, it is really hard to be able to define somebody by a godly characteristics. Because our culture and our world likes to define people by worldly characteristics. How many wins, how many losses, how much money, what kind of cars do I drive, what kind of arm candy do I have walking with me, what do I look like, what does she look like, how big is my house, how many people do I have over. Those kind of characteristics for success help set people apart. But what's really difficult is that he has a set of traits, has a set of godly characteristics that are rare to find in this world. But it's a shame because those are not the things that he gets known for. Those are not the things that he gets the most praise and acclamation for. Because our world doesn't value nearly enough the value of godly character. And in an NFL where godly character is very low, I think it's amazing that the Lord has blessed him to get to play, potentially in his last year, as an NFL quarterback in the Super Bowl. You can bet I will be watching it. So the question today is, what is godly character. What kind of character does God ask of His people? And today we are going to be continuing in the book of Ruth. So if you will start turning your Bibles to the book of Ruth in the Old Testament, after the book of Judges and before the book of 1 Samuel, as we are in the book of Ruth, if you weren't here last week, we presented two characters in chapter 1. We ultimately talked about this idea of loyalty. And one of the things that I mentioned about the book of Ruth that's so special is that the author uses different characters so that you can find somebody that you can connect with. And last week we talked about a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law. That was Naomi and that was the lady Ruth. And we talked about their story and kind of how that started to unfold. And today we're going to be in Ruth chapter 2, and we are going to be looking at two more characters. We're going to be looking at Ruth again, but this week we're going to be introduced to a man whose name is Boaz. And as we look at these two characters, I want to use these two people in the story to allow you to find something to connect with when it comes to trying to figure out or trying to understand what kind of character does God call from you. And I want to make it very clear before I do this. I am not sexist. I do not value men over women or women over men because the Lord has created each of us specifically and with great roles and great responsibilities. And I, more than anybody, understand that men and women are different. And today, if you hear some of the roles and responsibilities of men and women come out in the text, we are going to talk about a couple of things that are specific to a godly manly character and a godly woman character. Some characteristics of godly people are gender neutral, but there are some characteristics that we're going to connect with today that are specifically for women and specifically for men. So start with me, Ruth chapter 2, and on the back of your bulletin you will see we are going to start with the character, the godly character of Ruth herself. Ruth chapter 2, verse 1. Now Naomi had a relative of her on her husband's side from the clan of Elimelech, a man of standing whose name was Boaz. And Ruth, the Moabitess, says to Naomi, "Please let me go into the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whom eyes I find favor." And we'll start right there because there's three aspects of the character of Ruth that I want to plug in on. The first one is this: Ruth had a godly character, and one of the ways we know that is because she had an attitude of humility, which is another way of saying she had an attitude seen through the eyes of grace. The opposite of that, the opposite of eyes of grace and humility, are an attitude that's defined solely by entitlement. I imagine if you have any kids or grandkids, or you are of my age, that you look around in a world where an attitude of entitlement is running rampant. People who are entitled often say, "The world owes me. I don't deserve to start here or start there, but I should start on top." The attitude of entitlement says, that car, that house, those clothes, those are not good enough for me. I actually deserve this house, these clothes, and that vehicle. You see, the attitude of entitlement doesn't allow us to live with the godly characteristic of humility. And one of the quickest ways that God can rip entitlement away from you and I is in the workforce. And some of you know what I'm talking about. I want to show you again that verse. Look at verse 2. She, knowing very well that she has traveled with her mother-in-law from Bethlehem, the land of Judah, and she is not one of those people but she was a Moabitess. Now, we don't know back in Moab what her skills were and what she was used to doing. That's not given for us in the text. But you can imagine going to a place where you're not valued, where you're not liked, where people look down upon you. And what does she say? She says, let me go into the fields. Let me get the job that's the best in the field. No, look at what she says. Let me go into the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whom eyes I might possibly find favor. You see, she's walking into a situation with her eyes wide open, saying, you know what? I know who I am. I know what I'm doing. And I know it's going to be very hard to be able to successfully find a job. But she wants to work, and she wants to be successful. And so she says, I'm willing to go, and I'm willing to pick up the leftover seeds in the field. Now, one of the ways to connect this contextually, when I was in grade school, it was very clear that the person that we perceived as the lowest on the workforce at the school was the janitor. And that person or those people had probably one of the most difficult jobs in the school system in terms of the hours and the work that they did. But nobody thought very highly as students in the school of the janitors. But I want you to think of this. I want you to think that she walks into a situation, into an ISD, and says, listen, I don't even want the janitor's job. I'm willing to be the person in the closet who mixes the soap, who cleans the brushes, who does the things that even a janitor doesn't do. That's the type of humility that Ruth walked into the situation and said, this is what I'm willing to do. And I promise you, one of the most amazing attributes of a godly woman, a godly man, a godly person who loves Jesus is an attitude of humility. You see, as Christians, when we look at the world and we say we are entitled to everything that this world can give me, it negatively reflects on our relationship with Jesus. Another couple of places where I can show you that she had this attitude of humility are in verse 6 and verse 7, where the foreman replies, she is a Moabitess who came back from Moab with Naomi. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters. You see, it's very clear to other people what she's doing. It's just another representation. It's another emphasis. He repeats it again so that we know very clearly that Ruth is a woman who loves the Lord and who allows a humble attitude to be kind of the center of her life. You know, a second thing on top of a humble attitude is this idea of but an enthusiastic hard work ethic. Now, it's very hard sometimes to connect godly character with a solid work ethic. And I want to start this conversation with these words of encouragement and affirmation to you guys. You know, we came from the Dallas area where entitlement was rampant, where money is rampant. And we came here, and one of the things that I have noticed in a vast majority of the people here in this county is the value of hard work. Most of you guys in this room, I have gotten to connect with, and you guys are some of the hardest working people in society as a whole, where our society and my generation and the generation under me have a hard time honestly valuing hard work. And I imagine in your jobs and with your kids and your grandkids, it's something that you notice. But God gives us a very clear text here. I want to show you something. Look at verses 3 and verse 4 when it talks about Ruth. So Naomi says to her in reply for her asking to go get the leftover grain. Naomi doesn't say, no, you're too good for that. Don't worry about that. But listen to what Naomi says. She says, go ahead, my daughter. So Ruth went out and she began to glean in the fields behind the harvesters. She had a desire, she knew what she wanted, and she went and did it. A lot of times we often talk about the work that we want to do, and very rarely do we follow through, put our hands to the grind, put our feet to the table, and go and put the time in and get the work done. But look at what Ruth does. As it turned out, she found herself working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. This is one of the greatest texts for me throughout Scripture, because this text does a very good job of connecting the value of hard work with the value of godly character. And you know what's really unique about this text is it starts out with Ruth, not with Boaz, where we're going to talk about some of the things with him here in a second. But it's almost as if it is a very convicting slap in the face to us in the male species that the author does a very good job of representing the hard work of this woman in that culture. Men, we need to be setting the stage for our kids, for our grandkids, and for our culture to see us hard at work. But women, this text does a very good job of representing the fact that women are not out of the need for working hard. And it's amazing that godly character can somehow be connected with a godly hard work ethic. And like I said, most of you here, that has been something that the Lord has convicted and blessed me about in getting to know most of you guys. So finally, the third thing that I want to hone in on when it comes to the character of Ruth is that she had an attitude of consistency. Check out this real quick. Check out verse 7. So she says, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters." So she went into the field and she worked steadily from morning till now, except for an extremely short rest, as in the shelter. You know, one of the things that's very unique is an attitude of consistency. That word steadily there is a very important word to hone in on. Because Ruth not only went to work and worked hard, but she was willing to put hours upon hours upon hours in. And that takes an attitude, as most of you know. Sometimes it's easy to get to work 8, 8:30, 6, 6:30, whenever your workday starts. But as most of you know, when you finish lunch that day and you get back out there, it is hard sometimes to get back out there and to continue to work hard. And one of the things that this text does a very good job of is it does a very good job of connecting an attitude that people see when you work hard. She steadily, with great consistency, which means she persevered, she never gave up. She worked as hard at 3:30 in the afternoon as she worked at 9 o'clock in the morning. As the sun got hotter, as her feet got sore, as her hands began to hurt, she had an attitude that says, you know what, I'm going to work as hard as I can for the glory of God, and I'm going to do what it is that I can do. And I'm going to do it with an attitude of humility. And I think it's extremely convicting how she treats this idea of work. But one of the things that I want you to see throughout this text is that character, godly character, is always contagious. Look at this. Look at verse 11. Boaz replies, "I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father, you left your mother, you left your homeland, and you came to live with a people whom you never knew before. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May he richly be rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. Godly character is always noticed. It is always attractive to people. You see, our character, the things that are below the surface, the things that motivate us, the things that drive us, our attitude towards the Lord and our attitude towards other people, it's always either attracting people or it's detracting people. It's pushing people away. Your character, if it is a godly character for the Lord, will, like a sweet aroma, will attract people. So this is a question we start with in this text is, do you have a character that attracts people the way that the character of Ruth attracted Boaz? He heard about what had happened. Do people hear about your character? Do people hear about the way that you love your wife? Do people hear and see the way you work hard in the field day in and day out? Do people hear and make mention and notice how you love and sacrifice for your kids and for your grandkids? You see, the things that this world does lift up may not be the things that ultimately you want lifted up. The question is godly character in your life contagious? So secondly, we move to the character of Boaz. And there's two things that we get to notice in the character of Boaz in this text that are important. The two things are protection and provision. So first, look at protection starting in verse 8. So Boaz says to Ruth, "My daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with the servant girls." You see, what Boaz is doing is he's providing a hand of protection. So first, one, if you are a businessman, like Boaz is a businessman, or better yet, you are in a position where you manage people, as most of you are in this room, men, one of the things that you can do that glorifies God and is a godly example of character is by looking out for and providing protection for the people whom you manage. He saw Ruth and he said, listen, you need to put yourself in this spot of this field and you need to be around these people because it's in your best interest that you don't get harmed. Men, one of the things that God calls us to, we're not talking about muscles and bronze and brains, but we're talking about the simple characteristic of what it looks like as a man to protect those in our life that God asks us to protect. Now that's going to look different for a lot of you in a lot of different areas. But as a man who loves the Lord, it is one of your roles and one of your responsibilities and one of my roles and my responsibilities that I protect and that I have a sense of protection of those people that the Lord has placed in my path. Protection is not the only thing that produces the godly character in the life of Boaz. We also get this idea of provision. Verse 9b, he says, "And whenever you are thirsty," he gives her the imperative to go and to get a drink from the water jars that the men have filled. You see, it wasn't naturally custom that Ruth would be allowed to drink that water. Most of you know of this program called OSHA, which is a safety concern that the federal government puts on the workforce. Believe it or not, there were no safety concerns. The federal government did not implement any programs for safety in their day. And so as the manager and as a leader that Boaz was, he had to look out specifically for some of those women. And he made it very clear that she was allowed to go and to drink water, the physical provision for water, when he didn't have to. It wasn't naturally custom for those women to have a chance to get to take a break and to drink the water that the men had filled. They could go and get their own water, or they could go and drink water that maybe wasn't that good, but he gives her the opportunity to have water provided. But he doesn't stop there. Move on down to verse 14. At mealtime, which this is the break in the day where they were to take a small break, at mealtime, Boaz says to her, "Hey, you, Ruth, you don't have to. This is not something that I have to do, but I'm inviting you. Come over here. Have some bread and dip it in the wine vinegar." This is a step above even providing water. Now he's going to provide bread, and he's also going to provide something that showed kind of a sense of royalty. This is a way, men in this room, you have some provisions that you can provide in the life of people that are in your life. And when you go above and you go beyond what you naturally just need to provide, it shows a watching world that you have been blessed by a good God. And Boaz was a man whom the Lord favored, and he didn't just provide the simple things. He would go out of his way to provide, and especially to people who he didn't need to or wasn't supposed to provide. He provided for her water, bread, and a wine vinegar. This is above and beyond. This is the concept of grace. She didn't deserve any of this. But as a leader, as a man, not only do we provide protection, but we do some things in terms of tangible provision that honors the Lord. And as most of you know, we have a group of men in our culture who are selfish, who are lazy, who are looking out for me, my needs, and that's it. And that does not honor the Lord. Go to 14b. She sits down with the harvesters, and he then offers her some roasted grain. I'm not going to go into all that means, but he continually provides more and more for her than he is required to. He doesn't only provide the tangible things. Look at verse 15. As she gets up to glean, listen to what he does. Boaz gives orders to his men, the sub people, the middle management people who are in charge. He says, even if she gathers among the sheaves, don't embarrass her. Rather, pull some of the stalks for her from the bundles and leave them for her to pick up, but do not rebuke her. Listen, this is an amazing thing because this is a tangible way that Boaz provides for her emotional welfare. There are two emotional words in here that Boaz is looking out for her. First, he's looking to treat her in a way that does not embarrass her. Secondly, he's asking the people, the men, to do a portion of her job to make her job a little bit easier. And then he says, do not rebuke her. Keep in mind, men, you are called to provide and to protect on a tangible level. But men, we are called to also be concerned about the emotional welfare and the needs of ladies in our life. If you're married, you need to not only provide a house and protection physically, but you need to care about her emotional needs. That is one way that you represent godly character as a man, is by caring about her emotional stability. And just like the way it ended with Ruth, the character of Boaz is contagious. So Boaz looked upon and saw and took notice of the character of Ruth. I want you to see who takes notice of the godly character of Boaz. Verse 19. Well, let's just read 18. Ruth carried it back to town, everything that she had gathered that day, and her mother-in-law saw with her eyes, very specifically, how much she had gathered. Ruth had also brought out and gave her what was left over after she had eaten enough. Verse 19, her mother-in-law asks her, "Where did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed is the man who took notice of you." Then Ruth told her mother-in-law about the one whose place she had been working. The name of the man today was Boaz. "Lord, bless that man," Naomi said to her daughter-in-law. "He has not stopped showing kindness to the living and the dead." Naomi added, "That man is our close relative. He is one of our kinsman redeemers." This is the narrative way of trying to introduce this Hebrew element of what a kinsman redeemer is. But I want you to see that Naomi took notice. She didn't know Boaz. She had never interacted with Boaz. But she had seen how blessed her daughter-in-law was at work. And because of that, she took notice that there was some man, there was some redeemer who had stepped into her life and had done something great. Men, when you act in a godly form and fashion, people take notice. So we've talked about the character of Ruth. We've specifically talked about the male character of Boaz and the godly characteristics of both of those. So the third one I'd like to talk about today is the character of you. It's blank because each of you can write your name in that blank. So write your name in there, and under that, ask the question, is my character contagious? Do people notice the character that I have as a result of loving the Lord? Or do people only notice the car I drive, how good my hair looks, the clothes I wear, the style in which way I do things? Or do people take notice of your work ethic, your attitude of humility, your provision and protection of both the physical and emotional needs of women in culture? Because I promise you, if you are acting in a way that represents godly character, people will notice. It attracts people. And if you don't, then it probably is turning people away. And so, as we get a chance to end today, and Donna comes up here, this is how we're going to end. You got Ruth, you got Boaz, you've got godly character presented in two different characters. And today, you get to ask the question, am I a godly character? Do I have godly characteristics in my life? And so today, as we sing an invitation, you may stand, you may sit, and you may directly try to reflect with the Lord. But as we sing today, would you allow the Lord to bring encouragement where He needs encouragement and conviction where you need conviction? So if you'd like to stand, feel comfortable, and if you'd like to remain seated, that's completely up to you. But today, we're going to